all developer accounts by now. That'd be pretty cool. So if so, you go to playbook.com/account, which is your personal profile page all the time, but also if you're a developer, it has this plugins tab. And that's where you set up and start your plugin. So I'm gonna go there, playbook.com/account. And been doing some experimenting with plugins. We have Rotate Right as a plugin. I already wrote Rotate Left. I think the only thing left is a Flip Horizontal, and then it'll be unstoppable, so I'm gonna do that. But I hope somebody else does something a little more exciting. But you can also write Flip Horizontal if you want to. Flip Horizontal. Setting up your plugin, you can say what types your plugin supports, what types of files. So I'm going to use an image library for this, so I'm probably just going to support PNG and JPEG to start. That way I'm not going to crash on something I don't expect. I don't have an invocation URL yet, so I can leave that blank. I don't think anybody's going to pay to flip their images, so that'll be 0. Credits, you get to pick your price for the plugin. So this is in basically cents. Like 1 credit is 1 cent. And then min and max number of assets is pretty important to get right. So I'm gonna write Flip Horizontal, which takes 1 image in and writes 1 image back. So it only works on 1 image at a time. And if I set 1 and 1 as the min and max, then Playbook will guarantee it's only called with 1 image, which is great. If you were to write like a GIF creator, like that demo, then you would want the min to be more than 1, since you can't make a GIF of 1 image. So, all right, create my plugin, Flip Horizontal. I don't have an image yet for it. Okay, I'm gonna start up my development environment. So there's some links to this from the developer docs. Here's the docs. Quickstart. All right. Let's just try to find the link to that here. Oh, there we go. Hello World plugin. PD plugins repository. So there's a lot of examples here. I'm going to start with one of the ones that I wrote. I think I'll just clone the whole thing. So get the code, clone. Oh, this needs to be way bigger. All right, so how readable is that? Not readable. Almost readable. Okay. So I just got the example repository, which I think is a great way to start. I recommend that everyone do that too. And I'm going to open, I think I'm just going to copy Rotate Right into a new folder. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to edit Rotate Right in place. So I'm going to go to Rotate Right, see what's here. We have just a few files. There's a package.json. Happen to know this is like a Node.js app. I use Yarn, so I'm going to use Yarn to install the dependencies. Somebody asked, by the way, if, just to confirm, like, you can pick any stack you like. You can write this in Go, you can write this in anything. If you know how to deploy it or how to run it on your machine, you're good to go. You just, at the end of the day, are going to need to have like an endpoint that we call the invocation URL. So our examples all use Node.js and Yarn. I'm realizing I'm not going to have any idea how well people are following or questions or anything. So if you are following and have a question, please raise your hands.
Can you do LS so we can see what's in the folder?
Yes. I'll open up VS Code too. I think this one should be easier. Just a moment. Yeah. Oh, that was not the right spot. I wanted to open Rotate Right. Okay. Yes, this is what's in the code. I guess if you're starting up, so if you're starting from the examples, you can browse this. If you're starting from scratch, what's interesting here is just that we have an Express server. So Express is like a way to run just a light little server in Node. I need this thing to get out of my face. It's not cool at all. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, it's gone. Okay. So if you're looking at, what are the files here? Express.mjs is one, and that's going to get run when I run yarn dev. And then also in this is plugin.mjs, so source and plugin. Just realizing that actually one of the other examples has like the helper library, which might be better. I think I might switch over to the other example that has a helper library. So if you're following along, I kind of recommend you switch to actually. Let me go back up to the plugins repo, go over to split 2x2, and open that instead. It's the same structure. It has it's just in TypeScript instead. So please stop bothering me. Okay. And I'm gonna go back to split 2x2 and run yarn to install everything. If you don't have yarn, if you're new to Node, just Google stuff like install yarn and then try to install it. So what's happening here is split 2x2 is a plugin that takes an image and then splits it into quadrants. And so it's got code to do that. I'm just gonna delete that code, and I think I'm gonna grab that rotate right and try to run that instead. This is already being difficult. Just open everything. I think actually, now I think of it, the right thing that I should be doing is just running this plugin right off the bat, just making sure we can run this thing. So I am on the right track. So I'm back in the repository, I run yarn to install everything, and that was good. And now I'm going to run yarn dev, which is, at least in our examples, the way this runs. Module not found. Okay, it's a little weird. I just restarted it and it worked the second time, so I think yarn was just confused. Okay, so on the left, I'm running my local server. So it's running on port 3000 on my machine. I think I can just go check that out, localhost 3000. Cool. This happens to have just like a landing page thing, but that's not how you run the plugin. And it has instructions, use ngrok to expose this port to the world. I'll do that in this tab. Sorry, a little slower. I ran ngrok http 3000. And that gave me a URL that I can use to call this plugin. So this one, randomcharacters.ngrok.io. And if I go to that, oh, it's upset about me not signing up. I'll come back to this. Maybe it's only HTML. I think this was fine before. I'm going to plug that into my new plugin. So I have flip horizontal, that's my goal. Needs an invocation URL. I'll just plug that in. Save. Great. And so the next thing I need to do is install my new plugin into my actual Playbook workspace. So I have this thing, Playbook Plugin Sandbox. This is where I did the examples. And to do that, I go here to Apps on the left. This probably isn't going to highlight as it at all. Nope. That's okay. So Apps. And all of the way that the Sandbox plugins work is that if I created a Sandbox plugin, then it's available to me in my workspaces, but not to anybody else. So I created this and it's already showing up. I'll just install it. Go back to one of these things, and I see that it shows up here on the right. Click what I want to do next. So I'm running yarn dev. It's showing some outputs. I'm also running ngrok over here. It's a little too big for me to see. So these are the requests coming in. So when I click this, I'm going to hope that it's going to call ngrok, and I'm going to see the request come through. So let's see. Flip horizontal. Yeah, okay, we got the post request. That's great. Our server is logging some things. It's saying that it's processing images, which is what the example code does. If we go back here, yeah, it's currently processing. So it successfully called back to the callback URL and requested that we make 4 more images. And now I think it's uploading the file data to each one. So good news, because that means it was running when we started it off. This is probably a good checkpoint. If you are developing plugins, getting example code running is a good place to start. So we'll pause there. Any questions from people who are trying to do this? Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep going. All right, so 4 quadrants of the image. It's useful if you're doing mid-journey images. That was the goal. So I'm gonna go back and start editing this and experimenting a little bit. So this was the split 2x2 code. What I wanted to do was do a flip horizontal. So here's how the code was working. So when we got called with an invocation token, the callback, and then some assets. And we saw that we invoked the plugin. We were only expecting 1 asset, so we grabbed the first asset here, downloaded it. So that's all good so far. And then after that, we had the custom logic for splitting it, which I don't need anymore. So this is the point that I'm going to start. I think I'm going to start by just commenting everything else out. So right now the code does nothing. And I'll comment back the reporting success at the end. So if I leave it like this, I'm just going to go back and try this again. Right click, flip. Yep, received, invoked, and done. So it did nothing successfully. Great. So next thing I want to do is try reading this file in and seeing if I can flip it. I've already imported Sharp, which is like a node library for image manipulation. Sharp node docs. And just to see if I can figure out how to flip things. Resizing, nope, compositing, maybe, flip. So Sharp takes input, .flip, .toBuffer. And I think that there's also a to file. Let me grab that. Sharp input, which is the file that I already read, .flip, .toBuffer. And I think that we have toBuffer, but also toFile is a thing. I was interested to just kind of make sure things are working by writing to a file. So you can do toFile and then output.png. Okay. Back to the animation. Let's run this again. Flip. Name your terminal. And there is output.png, so open output. Is that flipped or is that, oh, it is flipped. Cool. So we successfully downloaded the image and flipped it. So now we just need to write it back. So rather than toFile, I'll go back to toBuffer, which is kind of like, let's keep this thing in memory. And then I need that code to create images again. I'm just gonna look in lib to see what's there. Because I'm using the helper code where there's a Playbook API helper, and that can do some things. So what I'm gonna do is look at what Playbook API can do. So I can create placeholder assets, which is what I want to do. And that takes this particular like input type. Let's try that. So, Playbook API dot create placeholder assets. It's an array. Maybe it's not an array. It is an array. Oh, title. Flipped image. I'm just going to try that first and see what happens without actually uploading the file data or anything. Flip horizontal. So it made this thing a flipped image. Looks like it's just loading. It has no file data, so it's never going to work. Let's delete that. It's going to go back and try to actually write that data now. This is a function, upload buffer to URL. It's used in the examples below, like this, upload buffer to URL. This one's a little harder to narrate. I'm just trying to upload my output image to the first placeholder asset, which I expect that there will be only one of because I only made one. I realize in a lot of ways I'm probably just doing things that I remember how to do. I'm not sure if this is actually making sense, but again, please do ask questions. And then also, once we kind of finish going through this, we'll just mill about and answer questions and help people build in case you're trying to build. So create placeholder assets and then upload the data to the upload URL that we got back. Let's see. Clicked image, loaded. Just going to do this again and log the result this time. So this is what we got back as placeholder assets. There was an array, there was one asset, and it had this upload URL. It's probably good. So we're fetching the first asset and its upload URL. Now we're just waiting to see if it is actually uploading or not. If not, we'll have to debug it. Feels like we're probably doing something wrong, so I'll do some debugging. I'm not sure how much I can narrate, but I can answer questions in case people have questions about anything, not necessarily this. Or if somebody sees a typo, that would be pretty cool too. It actually was working the whole time. We should have known. We were just being very slow about it. Okay, I'm just gonna clean up my console logs, get rid of the old code. Get rid of the stuff from the previous plugin. And so this is the result of what we've got for flip horizontal. Maybe what's more useful actually here is that I can just walk through the code a little bit more carefully, which could have done at the start. So how this works is that the plugin code itself is within this file source plugin.ts. But the node server is sitting outside, and it kind of came with the example, so I didn't really talk about it too much in terms of how does it work and what does it run. The node server is this thing, Express runtime, because it's using Express, which is the name of Node's popular server. So what this does is it sets port to be 3000, it sets up the app to use JSON content type, and then it starts listening. So it started listening for, this is the home page when I went to it in the browser. And then this is listening for a post request. So it listens for a post request at just the home URL, just at slash. And when it gets the post request, it unpacks these variables from the request body. So that's request body, and we're expecting that the body will always have these three things. And it does. So this is the invocation token, which is like a unique token that you'll get, just so you can reply with it so that we know that it's like all one request. It'll have callback URL, and then it will have this data about assets. Like, what do you want to operate on? And then it just passes all of this on to our plugin code. So this is plugin, which is like imported from that plugin.js file. I guess it knows. So, which means when we're thinking about the plugin, we can kind of pretend like the inputs are already just the token, the callback, and the assets. So then what we do in this plugin is step one, I'm using the Playbook helper library. So I'm just going to initialize that, initialize the library with the invocation token and the callback URL. Then I download the input asset. I'm using assets at 0 because I configured my plugin to take a min and a max of one asset, so I'm never going to worry about is there more than one asset that it got called with. And then I download that asset to memory. So a buffer is like, memory of the running process. Then we're using sharp, which is that image manipulation process, to read the file, flip it, and save it back to a buffer, like back to memory. Then we're asking Playbook to create some placeholder assets for us, because we're about to write data back. So we would like to have a place to write that data. So at this point, what Playbook did was it made assets, and it showed them in the UI, and the asset has this title, which I said would be flipped image. But those files don't actually have any data yet. So in Playbook, those will just show us like loading until we finish our operation and upload the file data. And then this last step is that we upload the file data. So for each of those placeholders that we made, we have an upload URL, which is unique and lets you upload data to. We'll just do that. And then we report that the plugin is done operating by calling report status of success. And then we're done. I think that's pretty much the whole local dev thing I wanted to go through. It's opened up to general questions, including questions like, none of that made sense, I'm trying to clone the repo, where do I start? But also any technical questions. Yeah? Will the recording be made available? Yeah, we're gonna try. Assuming that we can piece it all together properly with audio. I think the audio will be the challenge, but we will try. Oh, sorry, yes, left first.
Yeah, I had a use case question.
Yeah.
Say you want to make a trailer for a movie, and you have a bunch of assets all over the place. I guess I'm trying to get to the point where you go from all the creative inspiration, all the clips and everything, to the finished trailer. I'm trying to figure out how Playbook, I'm trying to replace Dropbox essentially with Playbook, but I'm trying to figure out what's the way to connect it? What's the I guess that's the smart people come in and figure out the plugins for that, right?
The smart people might be you. The question was about how do you, maybe you have a bunch of assets that would go into a movie trailer. How do you stitch them all together and then maybe write back the trailer? It's a good question, and that could end up being a really involved workflow that involves a lot of steps. If you were to answer that with, if the only hammer you have is the plugin system, and you wanted to answer that question, what you would do is hopefully all of those assets for the trailer are all gathered together, maybe in a Playbook board, and you would have your user select all of them, and then click on your plugin. The plugin would call out to maybe some kind of either automated assembly process or manual assembly process, which would download them. Automated is maybe easier. Maybe let's say you have a video file and a subtitles file, or maybe 2 video files called 1 and 2, and subtitles files called 1 and 2, and your goal is to stitch together, the videos by number and add the subtitles.
I mean, actually in that case, say you get a video file, and then you also get an audio file, and say the audio file is longer than the video file. Is there a way to write up the code so it automatically splices the audio file perfectly in sync with the video file based on the length of the video?
Yeah.
That would be useful.
That would be really cool. Okay, great question. So the question is now, let's say you had a video file and an audio file that are supposed to go together, but the audio file is longer. So if you were to call, we can now imagine selecting both of those and calling a plugin, would there be a way to splice them together so that they end up the same length, crop the audio file? And yeah, that's definitely code you could write, especially in a plugin. So what that would look like is that your plugin would be set to receive maybe a min of 2 and a max of 2 files. You always call this please with 1 video and 1 audio. And then when your plugin gets triggered, it will have both of those as the selected assets. So your plugin, the code you're writing, will receive a link to the video file data and to the audio file data. And then in your code, you'll have to write that logic to take the first, read the length of the video file, crop the audio, and then merge them together. But I'm sure FFmpeg can do it. It can do everything. And ChatGPT can tell you how to use FFmpeg, which was always the hard part. And then you can write that back as a video and then call create assets to save it into Playbook. You could definitely do that. Not sure if that makes sense. Okay, cool. That's a really good, actually, case to use plugins for. That makes a lot of sense. Yes?
I see in your examples you're mostly running a local node server, but I was thinking it might be simpler for me to go straight to a Lambda function.
Yep.
Run the server. So from what I can see, it looks like the process is you make a Docker VS, you upload that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the question is about once you past running locally and you want to deploy this thing into production for everyone to use, how do you do that? And you can use an AWS Lambda function or Google Cloud function, or you could deploy a Docker container to be run as a serverless function. So yeah, a few things to say about that. We do have examples for all of that. So this example is actually kind of clever. So it has an express runtime that imports this plugin.ts file with the logic and runs it in an express server. It also has a Cloud Functions runtime. So if you were to deploy these 2 functions, then they would call the same code and run it. Basically, the thing to keep in mind, whether you're using these examples, whether you're using a stack that you're comfortable with, which will work just as well, the one thing to just the gotcha is that when Playbook calls your plugin, you have to respond right away with a 200 to say acknowledged, and then do your work asynchronously. And unfortunately, I don't know of a provider that has that just super off the shelf. So with a Lambda, what you want to do is use, I think, their gateway feature to be your handling URL and use that to kick off your Lambda function. And with Cloud Functions, you have to actually write 2 functions. You have to write one that's the handler, and then that kicks off your async process. Someday someone, I'm sure, will make this much easier, but and then maybe if you have your own stack in mind, you can find your own solution to that. But that's the one thing to keep in mind. Yeah, and we do have a lot of people that actually just develop. They skipped local dev. They wrote a function, they deployed it straight off, grabbed that URL and just ran that. Totally works. as long as you have that flow figured out, like the deployment process to like test your code. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. Uh-huh.
How do error states work, especially around the currency?
Error states, especially around currency. So right now, the only thing your plugins can do to say that there's an error is to call back report status as failed. Right now, we don't even have a way to like say why you failed. That will come soon though. That'll be like, we're just kicking this off. So that's just basic success or failure. Of course, your plugin could return failed, or it could just completely crash because it like ran out of memory or something, which we've hit plenty of times writing the first few plugins. Playbook will notice that like the plugin eventually didn't respond and will mark it as failed. And then in terms of like currency or charging for the plugin, we're probably going to iterate on that. So just as a first note, like this may change. But what happens right now is that it will not pay the developer, but it will charge the user. So just kind of like the most safe, conservative approach. There's no point writing something that fails because you're not going to get paid back. But also as a user, like I don't know, maybe you did some work, like someone's going to get charged. I realize now that I'm saying that the result is that Playbook keeps the money. That's certainly not the goal. Like we'll find out a way that like makes this like fair, but that's just the start. Yeah. Cool. Any more questions? Yeah.
So just a clarification, say I want to make a plugin that takes multiple inputs. I saw that the plugin takes the input, right?
Yep.
In what order are those assets aligned with the device? Is it like by selection or is it?
Yeah, the question was if you have a plugin that takes multiple assets as input, what order does it get the assets in? And it's by selection. So when you select, you can see that. There's a little 1 for the first one I clicked, and then there's a 2 for the second and a 3 for the third. So it will get them in that order. Yeah. Discovered that when we were making the GIF maker. It came out in the wrong order. We were like, wait a second. That matters. Yeah. All right. Any more questions? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna break with this kind of walkthrough, but I'm just gonna walk around, and if people are developing things, I'll help you out. We've got other team members here too that can also help out. You can also nag the people at the front desk; they know what they're doing. And yeah, this will kind of be like a workshop. Keep drinking, keep chatting. Find us in Discord. And if I don't, say hi to you by the time we all head out, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.